Hi, I'm Linda Campbell, and I want to share with you some effective strategies for dealing with the negative messages that you receive from other people. We all receive negative messages at times. They can be direct, something somebody actually says to us, or indirect. We can form a lot of opinions just by observing somebody's body language, facial expression, or how they're acting around us. Sometimes these messages are intentional, sometimes they're accidental, but we all get them. We are set up from the time that we're babies to be aware of the feedback that we're getting from other people. If a baby is reaching for something new, it'll look to a parent's face to see the expression the parent is making. If the parent looks encouraging, happy, smiling, the baby will keep reaching. It reads the expression to mean that what it's reaching for is safe, keep going. But if the parent looks alarmed or concerned, the baby will automatically withdraw its hand. Before we even know our names, we're learning to read the body language, the expression, the tone of voice, and to respond to it. And this is useful early on in our lives because it keeps us safe before we know what's safe or dangerous. But then it just continues after that point. We go to school and we look towards our peers to see if we fit in. We look to the teacher to see if our grades are good enough. Are we considered an A, B, or C person? And then we begin dating, and again, that tendency to look outside of ourselves to get feedback from other people is obvious. We look to our potential significant others to get a sense of if we're attractive enough, desirable, marriable. And then we go into the workforce, and of course we're given a title, a job, money, depending on how valuable our skills are seen to be. Again, we're looking outside of ourselves to see how we measure up. And so it starts out innocently enough as a way to keep ourselves protected when we're babies, turns into a lifelong tendency to look towards other people to see how we're doing. And the messages that we receive are particularly potent if they come from a parent. We are hardwired to want to please them. A person we put in authority, we're taught from the time we're little to respect what the big people have to say. Or our peers, somebody that we want to be liked by. So think about it. All throughout our lives, we're vulnerable to taking in messages from other people. And those messages inform our self-esteem, our identity, our self-love. We take them in and they shape us for better or worse. The problem is that the messages that inform us, who we become, are not even really about us. This is where it's really important to look at those negative messages, to examine them. Let's talk more about how exactly you do that. Now, sometimes the message we received wasn't intended the way we interpreted it. Let me give you an example. I was giving a presentation once, and there was a lot of people in the room. And for the most part, they were writing notes and smiling and laughing at the right places. But I got fixated on this one man at the back of the room. He had this scowly expression on his face, and he was sitting the whole time with his arms crossed across his chest. I got so busy focusing on him, I barely noticed all of the other people in the room. At the end of the presentation, people were lining up to talk to me. And again, they were friendly, asking me questions, asking for a business card. But this guy kept standing at the back of the room with his arms across his chest, just letting everybody in front of him. Finally, when it came his turn to talk to me, all he did was shake my hand and thank me for giving him so much to think about. And I realized that maybe what I thought was a scowly expression was just his thinking face. And maybe he had his arms crossed across his chest because he was cold. Maybe he was letting people in front of him because he was polite. All this time, I was so focused on him, the expression on his face, and all the things I was making it mean, that I was barely paying attention to what else was going on in the room. So we need to examine the negative messages that we think we're getting to see if in fact they're intended that way, or if maybe we're simply looking at it as a negative message. Maybe the problem is not the message, but rather our own interpretation. To get to another interpretation, you can ask yourself the following questions. Do I know that what I'm telling myself is true? Is there another way of looking at this? What else could be going on? Sometimes by asking yourself these questions, you realize that the interpretation you were putting on a message is way off, and in fact, something else is going on entirely. Now, if in fact the message was intended the way we received it, we want to ask ourselves if there's any truth to the message. Sometimes people give us valuable and useful feedback that we could use to grow or improve, but because of the delivery or our state of mind at the time, we don't see the value of their feedback. Sometimes we feel defensive because on some level we recognize the truth of what the other person is telling us. We feel called out or embarrassed that somebody saw something in ourselves that we don't particularly like and they're talking about it. It's useful in the moment to learn to take a few deep breaths and to step back and look at what the other person is saying objectively. If there is truth to the message, we can decide what we need to do next. Maybe we simply say thank you for your feedback and let it go. Or if it matters to us and it's within our ability to control, maybe we can use the feedback that they gave us to jumpstart our own growth. And so again, to summarize, when we get negative feedback from somebody else, we want to ask ourselves, is there any truth to this? Is this useful to me in some way? Can I use this to make some sort of a positive change? If there's no validity to it, or the change isn't worth it for you to make, simply let it go. One way to let it go is to simply thank the other person for their feedback. If you would like to do it symbolically, you could also imagine their statement being like a helium balloon, and you're just letting go of the string. Another way to deal with negative messages, especially those we receive as children, is to look at the source of the messages. When somebody is mean or critical, gives us a negative message, our tendency is to take it in, to take it personally. But what if it really has nothing to do with us? Often, the way somebody treats us is just a little window of insight into something unresolved within them. If we can learn to step back and look at another person's behavior objectively against the context of what we know about them, their background, their upbringing, the experiences they've been through, we might find an explanation for their behavior that has absolutely nothing to do with us. Let me give you an example. Let's say Betty is sitting at the dinner table having a good time eating dinner with her parents, sharing something exciting that happened to her that day, and she gets a little overexcited. Her mom, in response, gets triggered, starts screaming at her, yelling at her, getting angry. And of course, Betty takes it personally. When we're little, we don't even realize our parents had a life before we came along. We assume that their behavior has something to do with us. But what if we knew what shaped the behavior of Betty's mom? If we knew about her background, what life was like for her growing up, what her upbringing was like, we could look at her behavior more objectively. Maybe as a kid, Betty's mom was punished for being noisy, so that's why she was triggered as an adult. She was passing on the same thing that was done to her. This isn't about justifying or defending somebody else's poor behavior. It's about depersonalizing it. When we understand what shaped somebody else's behavior, why they act the way they do, we no longer take it on. We recognize that it really has nothing to do with us. So get curious. Ask yourself, what do I know about this person that explains the way they're behaving? If you don't know, you may need to speculate. Even if you're unsure of what exactly happened that made this person act the way they're acting, there has to be something. There is a saying that hurt people hurt people. There must have been something in this person's background that caused them to act the way they are acting with you. So to summarize, when it comes to those negative messages we get from other people, we want to check our interpretation, see if it's useful to us, if there's some truth in it and it's a way to begin some growth process, or consider if it's really about the other person. By doing so, we don't take it on, and our level of self-love, self-worth, and deservingness begins to really grow. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please share it with somebody that you know could benefit from it. And if you would like personal assistance with things like anxiety, stress, habit control, past traumas, please contact me. My website is yourauthenticself.ca. This has been Linda Campbell. Thank you so much for listening.